Hey, everybody. Okay,
Hey, Keith.
so Angela Wick is here, and we're super excited. We've been looking forward to this. So, of course, neither of us entirely know what to expect because we have a couple of prepared questions and comments, but we want you to really kind of direct us on what's interesting. So, the one thing that's been determined is the basic overall topic, but it's a big one. Uh, Talking about overlap, intersection, differences between business analysis and data science. But both Angela and I have experienced multiple name changes in each of our fields over the years. So it's not like there's just one name for these things that we're talking about. So what I'd love to do is get some feedback right away from all of you on where you're joining from. And if you happen to be familiar with Angela's work, but not mine, or vice versa, that would be very helpful to know because we imagine that we'll have a mix of the data science crowd and the business analysis crowd, but just getting a little bit of a feel for who's joined. So what I want to start with is just super basic stuff, Angela. How did you enter business analysis as a field? And then a question that came to me earlier that I shared with you yesterday when we were chatting. Where does business analysis live in the organization typically, to the extent that there is a typical? And then I'll answer after you.
Okay. All right. Hello, everybody. So how did I become a business analyst? In some ways, I've always been one. It just wasn't called that back then, right? I started my career right out of university with a company called Anderson Consulting, now known as Accenture. And I did a lot of business analysis and system analysis work and just kind of migrated through different roles, focused on business analysis. Even after leaving there, got into different types of data projects as well. So definitely a passion for this. And where does business analysis live? It can live everywhere in the organization, right? Now, the title business analyst can live in a PMO, an IT group, a business group. In some organizations, it lives in all three. There's different types of business analysts. But what's really important, Keith, is that we understand that business analysis happens in all different professional roles. It's not just for those with the title of business analyst. It's about making decisions and solving problems and connecting people, process, and data. So it's really quite a wide swath, right?
Yeah, for sure. I don't think it's wildly different. On my side, I really like the phrase that I've been hearing the last couple of years, data professional, because
Ooh.
I think it's an acknowledgement that almost everybody in the organization has some connection with data. But if that's a focus of their career, whether it be business intelligence or IT or data science, that we all kind of fall under this data professional umbrella because
Yeah.
it's so difficult to nail down,
Well,
a
we
more
say
specific.
analysis professional or business analysis professional too. There's
Yeah,
still a lot of overlap, right? It's yeah.
for sure. So to answer the same question that I posed to you, my entry point to data science was statistics. And
Oh.
then I was a statistics software trainer. And then I started doing data mining, which is not a phrase that we use anymore. At least it doesn't mean what it used to mean back in the 90s. But back in the 90s, data mining was basically predictive analytics. And even predictive analytics is a little bit out of fashion now because people tend to say AI. But AI is one of those terms that's so broad that it's very difficult to really nail down what somebody means. But when I'm talking about data science today, I'll mostly be talking about predictive analytics. I'll say one more thing about that is that for me, data science kind of addresses the inference stuff. So more the statistics stuff as well as the predictive analytics. But I
Yeah.
think we'll end up talking more about predictive analytics
So
today.
did you just say predictive analytics you were doing in the 90s, but then today it's machine learning? It, can you touch on that a
Okay.
little bit? Like, wait, you're doing predictive analytics today, but it's different than it was in the 90s? Is that the summary you're coming out with?
No, I think it's actually quite similar. It really
Uh-huh.
is. I think it's quite similar, but the names have changed. So in the
Okay.
90s, it was called data mining. And then
Okay.
data mining, for whatever reason, has been attached to this idea that it becomes the word mining, when applied to data, became almost a pejorative, almost like it was a privacy thing. But it's really just
Mm.
building predictive model is what the phrase originally meant. So predictive analytics became more popular, but now everything's machine learning or AI. But so what I've been calling it lately is traditional machine learning, to contrast it with something like computer vision, which has
Mhm.
changed by leaps and bounds over the last
Right.
couple of years. But traditional machine learning, like loan default and this kind of stuff, has been
Mhm.
around for decades.
Well, and my understanding and through the projects that I've been on is, in the 90s and before modern day machine learning, teams had to mine the data, find the connections, find the patterns themselves, write those algorithms themselves, which was a very interesting analysis process. It took a long time. But the huge difference today is the modern machine learning technology finds the patterns for us and can take in so much more data and does take in more data to find the patterns for us once we serve it up certain variables and data points. And am I on with that? Is that how a data
Um,
scientist would describe that?
it's interesting. I just noticed that Dean Abbott has joined, and I want to kind of scroll through the comments here in a second, but Dean will
Yeah.
get a kick out of this. In the 90s or even in the 80s, we didn't find the patterns on our own either.
Okay.
But what that's a reference to is a very specific period in the development of AI, because it's something that people talk about all the time. If you listen to 3 AI keynotes, chances are all 3 of them will mention this. We
Okay.
used to hand code and so on. The algorithms, of course, are written by humans, but the pattern finding has been done by machines for decades. But there was a very particular moment in AI that was noteworthy, where we were in one of the AI winters when neural nets were out of fashion, and it was around that time.
Okay.
And it was during that period that something became popular called expert systems, where you would interview a subject matter expert and you would hard code their knowledge. Usually it was something like a lawyer or a doctor or something like that. And when I was an undergrad, so this would be late 80s, neural nets were starting to take off among like the postdocs and stuff again. But down where I was as like a 19 or 20-year-old, no one was talking about neural nets because they felt that had failed.
Ah,
And everybody was talking these expert systems.
okay.
But even then, I mean, some of the algorithms that are influential now came out in '84 that find patterns. CART is a famous one, which a number of folks on here will. And then Dean just chimed in about that '80s AI winter period. So, Andrew, let's just take a second to scroll through any particular pattern coming with. Actually, quite a few folks are joining that are in a BA role now and are familiar with your work. And I recognize some names, but I think we might have we've got quite a few BAs in the house, I think.
Yeah, I think from a BA perspective, my guess is, and BAs, please chime in if I'm on or off on this. BAs are hearing data science is hot, machine learning is hot. The future of everything is data, data, data. And I think at a really macro level, we can all go, yes, of course, data rules the world, the exponential curve of how much data is being processed and available. We've all heard these statistics. I think BAs are sitting here going, well, how far into data should I go with my training, with my career as a BA? Or should I even migrate into data science? I think those are the types of questions that BAs have. Is what if I don't do any data skills in my skill repertoire? How much data skills should I have? Where do I start? What's critical in terms of learning about data? And maybe for the data folks on the line, I'm guessing it's about, well, I know I hear business analysis is important, but what is it and what do I do with it as a data professional?
I think that's a really good direction to take our conversation, because something that I was, and I want to acknowledge Mark and Patrick as well. You might have some folks that you recognize in the
I do.
comments here.
I do
Um,
recognize a few folks on here. So go
this
ahead.
this may seem like a different topic, and if I'm wrong, it might turn out to be a different topic. But I think the best way to continue on the thread that you just started is, I was watching a bit of your course on project management and product management.
Okay.
And I think I have, my gut tells me that and Bart has joined us as well, one of our fellow instructors. Let me see, can be yeah, it'll be interesting to get everybody's take on this. But
he is funny though. He says applied business analysis can still be done with pivot tables. And I would say, as a BA, I learned pivot tables early in my career and I used them often as a basic BA. So Bart, I'm not sure if I'm hitting on what you're saying there, but I'm gonna just chime in that yeah, pivot tables are things BAs do.
well, I'm gonna make a note to revisit a topic that you and I talked about, Angela, recently, which was the difference between kind of like high level forecasting and individual instance prediction. I'm gonna make a note to come back to that.
Okay. Yeah.
But I wanna stay on this project versus product for a moment, because I think it's going to help us talk about when who I've collaborated with over the years as a data scientist and where those roles intersect, because I think our conversations have led us to believe that there's actually a substantial amount of overlap, but I haven't really worked side by side with a BA over the years that often. And I think it'll be very interesting to try to solve the puzzle of why, you know.
I think when you bring in the terms project management and product management, it's introducing two more roles and skill sets. So if you have a data skill set and a business analysis skill set, two different skills, definitely some overlap. If you bring in project manager and product manager, you're bringing in two more titles, roles, and skill sets, also with some overlap. So a project manager is responsible for defining the budget, timeline, scope, resources, etc., right? A product manager defines the product to be built, whether that be for external customers or internal customers. A business analyst is kind of more synonymous with product versus project. If that's pinging on something you're thinking, Keith, right? The spontaneity that, just to again tell everyone, Keith and I did not prepare because we wanted it to be spontaneous. And we think that brings the best live events, by the way, right? So there's kind of those four quadrants, right? And I think in every data effort, there's huge data focus, there's analysis focus, there is project management, and there is product management. I think all four quadrants come together in every effort we all work on, right?
Well, you're right, the wheels were turning. I'm usually not super expressive. I probably would be a pretty good poker player because I've got this kind of quiet thing. But when the ideas start churning, I like light up. So you were picking up on that. Yeah. So what I was noticing when I was watching that course of yours is that I have definitely been assigned as an external, most of my career, I've been an external resource. So think about it now. Back when we did more business travel, I'd jump on the plane, I'd fly out, I'd have coffee with the client, I'd be meeting everybody, right? And then we'd be figuring out who from the external team is going to be involved, who from the internal team is involved, lots of chit chat, getting ready to launch our project together.
Yeah.
Probably over the years, about a third of the time, maybe a little bit more, there's been some kind of project manager involved, mostly from the standpoint of kind of enforcing scope, I guess would be, I don't know if that's the right phrase, but okay, what's the scope going to be? Everybody agrees. And then sometimes the contact might be as minimal as we were supposed to be at stage 2 by tomorrow. Are we on schedule? Kind of a thing, right? So working with a project management office in terms of scope and those kinds of things, possibly budget. So when I did projects for IBM, for instance, there would almost always be an IBM project manager assigned that would be doing that, but sometimes on the client side too. So that's something that I've encountered quite a bit. To my knowledge, I've never been assigned as a collaborator in internal BA.
Yeah.
So what I've found over the years is that I've had to do a number of the things that I'm learning now are associated with that role, because if there was no one to do it, I had to make sure that the model that I was building was put into some kind of context where it was going to produce value.
Yeah.
And in my experience, there was no one else there to do it. So I've always thought of that as kind of a senior data scientist or a data science architect, the person who's ensuring that the project's going to produce value and doing all those kinds of things. So I've spent most of my career switching hats, and I had no idea that one of those hats was kind of sort of like BA.
BA. Yeah. Yeah. No. And another interesting thing, and as I was hearing your experiences there, is that sometimes you said you worked with project managers with different levels of involvement. What I've found over the many years is there are many project managers that also do the business analysis when there isn't a BA on the team, for example. So, and sometimes the development team or data analysts, other roles pick it up, right? Business analyst is such a wide range of skills, and so many different titles do it. But I remember I'd go to project management conferences as a BA person, and I was like, "Oh, are you project manager? Do you work on requirements work?" "Of course I do." "Oh, okay. So you do business analysis?" "No, I'm a project manager." And so there's always confusing, like, but they're doing the business analysis work. Just like you would say, "No, I'm a data scientist." "Oh, but you're doing this type of thing." So business analysis has a long-standing reputation for being misunderstood. Not a lot of people understand. It's getting better and better. But I mean, just a plug right now for the LinkedIn Learning stuff you and I are part of, right? Is that Microsoft Skills Initiative with LinkedIn Learning put out business analyst as one of those top skills. And there's a free certification program right now on LinkedIn Learning with a Microsoft partnership on that they can find on LinkedIn Learning.
Well, and along those lines, we're having this conversation for a couple of reasons. We were fortunate enough to be in a cohort together of the Creator Accelerator program because there's quite a few instructors, but there are only half dozen of us that were instructors and part of that cohort. So we had this natural connection and had a couple of conversations. But another reason is that as a data scientist, I've never been super familiar with IIBA, but I know you're incredibly active with IIBA and have been for many years. You'll have to remind me what the acronym is in a minute, but I just wanted to say that a couple of my courses are qualified for continuing ed in IIBA, and naturally I became very curious about what brings a BA professional to my courses and that whole connection. So I actually around November or December or something, I sat in on a IIBA lecture that I saw advertised on on Zoom. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that organization, because there has to be some overlap there.
Definitely.
If the content that I'm teaching is So
IIBA was founded. Oh gosh, I just nailed myself into a corner trying to pronounce a year. I know we have a lot of folks on the line too that are IIBA members, so a little shout out to everyone there. But IIBA was founded, I think, back in like 2005, 2006-ish. And it's really about identifying the profession of business analysis and kind of giving business analysts a home, right? So they have all kinds of certification programs. One of their most recent ones is business and data analysis. So it's really addressing that overlap between the two. So you can get certified as a business analyst at different levels of the profession. You can do a cybersecurity and analysis certification, a data and analysis certification, an agile and analysis certification, right? So you can get different specialties or subsets of business analysis. And so it's super cool that your courses are part of the programs that help people qualify for certification and retain their certification. And really how the IIBA and the BA industry looks at data and data science is all about helping the business leaders form their hypotheses and questions that the team then works with data scientists to answer. So you mentioned on one of our previous conversations that the rate of these models that gets actually used in businesses and deployed is really low. And I've heard that too from a business analysis perspective. And what we talk about from a BA perspective is that's because we're not quite understanding and defining the right questions that'll add the business value. Someone's coming to a data science saying, "Hey, here's what I need," versus really going through a true analysis process of, are we asking the right questions? Are we developing the right hypotheses? Now, someone like you is an expert in developing hypotheses. There's no doubt in my mind, because that's what data scientists do. Business analysts need to start learning that skill as well, because they need to start facilitating those conversations ahead of time. so that we have the right hypotheses defined versus someone like you coming in from the outside and kind of grasping at straws of what the hypothesis is. And someone's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay, we just want the project done, go do the work, right? So I don't know if that helps, but a little shout out here. We have Patrick on the line, says he was part of the inaugural IIBA meeting held on October 29th, 2003 in Toronto with the founding 28 members. Thank you very much for that, Patrick. I was wrong on the year and I knew I wasn't going to nail it perfectly, but yeah. So I've been a part of IIBA since probably around 2005, 2006 was one of the first couple hundred certified, and I grew into helping them with their competency model, eventually on the BABOK team to help write the BABOK and various other things that I've done with them. So I'm glad that your classes are a part of it, because BAs need to understand what are predictive analytics, what are other types of analytics, and how do we educate our business leaders on what they can do with this stuff and then define those hypotheses correctly, right?
Well, and I think where we should probably go next is how businesses get value from predictive analytics, because it's actually a fairly specific thing that can be explained in a couple of minutes. But a quick question to Patrick, because I'm intrigued now. Patrick is a conference organizer in Europe. That's how we know each other. And Patrick is very active in the machine learning and AI space.
The same Patrick I was just talking about with IIBA.
Yes. Yes, indeed,
I love this. Patrick's the perfect audience member here, right?
So Patrick, I'm curious if you're also active in the BA space as well.
I think he is.
If so, you might have a unique perspective on the overlap between the two. I know that it's somewhat difficult to chime in via with a detailed question like that, but super curious.
Yeah, I know, and we'll have a delay here. He won't even hear us for 30 seconds. So can I fill in a little bit? So it's interesting because that's a huge conversation. I also would love to hear Patrick's point of view on that. How we like to describe it is that the business analyst is all about understanding the business outcomes, the strategy, the change, and really the context. A business analyst doesn't necessarily need to understand as deep of a skill set as a data scientist. And that's what would be kind of fun to dig into, right? Well, where is that border? Where is that boundary? And
so I may have to rope in Dean too if he's involved, because I'm about to talk about return on investment and predictive analytics and just kind of give a quick sketch of like how that works. Because again, I found that in my career, I've had to be the one to do that. But I actually have a course on the subject in the library.
Oh, good.
And I'm not sure the course does well. It's found an audience, but I think that for some data scientists, their initial reaction to the idea that they would take a course on ensuring return on investment in predictive analytics is that they might be puzzled as to, is that my part of it? Is it my job to do that? Or is my job to build the model? Is it somebody else's job to do that? But again, in the absence of anyone else to do it, I found that I had to do that, in my career.
I think that's a super important class, because even if you're not doing the work, you have to understand the work from what the other is doing in order to build a model, right?
Yeah.
I mean, to me, there's no doubt if you still want a job, the model better have business value and ROI. So how do you understand, whether you're doing it or receiving the output of it, what that ROI is? Because I'm a huge believer in, business analysis is all about aligning that ROI through the detailed work. We don't do anything technical if we can't align it to an ROI. And that is something interesting that both roles and specialties need to really brush up on if they want to take off in their careers, right?
Yeah, for me, it's core to what I do. It's something that I'm talking about in the very first hour that I meet with the client. There's some very specific things that I do. Bar's chiming in. He thinks that all data professionals have to, address this at each step. But again, I find that for a lot of data scientists, they go, that's something we'll figure out after the model is built. But I don't even know how you start to build the model. So I'll give you a quick example. It's the easiest one that comes to mind is the same one that I use in the course. But let's say I'm brought in to predict whether or not an individual insurance claim will be fraudulent. In fact, I was on a very interesting project once where it was a specific kind of fraud. It was what's called staged accidents. That's where the criminal enters the intersection on purpose to cause an accident, because then there's medical fraud and everything that follows from that. So it's a very specific thing. So, and this will be a good time to talk about the kinds of projects we're on and or the roles that we play on those projects. So if I'm brought into a client and that's the nature of the project, okay, my primary job is to predict which individual claims are occurring. So I think of data science as having two aspects. There's inference and there's prediction. And when you're doing inference, you might be asking something like, why is our revenue down in the Northeast? And there you would have hypotheses and you're testing hypotheses. But on the predictive analytics side, actually, you don't start with hypotheses. It's really quite different, right? Because you're making a prediction about individual cases. So you're looking at hundreds of thousands, millions, possibly tens of millions of records, and the machine learning is finding the pattern for you. And since the machine learning is finding the pattern for you, you have to confirm the pattern after, but you don't start with a hypothesis.
So here's where I think BAs fit into that scenario. So if you're building this model to determine which claims are fraud, and you're looking at all this data, right? And you're running different scenarios of data. You might take in data, take out data, filter data, slice and dice it to see what the model does. I believe a BA can add tremendous value in collaborating with you to help you understand where the data comes from, the process it comes from, the quality of the data, right? So does that data that you're looking at come from a human, and what does that process look like? How is the variability of data quality happening because of that human interaction process versus a systematic process? And then where is the source of that data? And eventually somewhere that data comes from a human again, right? No matter how many layers reserved back. So I think a business analyst who really has skills at combining, people, process, data, and tech can help a data scientist with their models to really bring that context full picture, so that as you're like puzzled by the patterns and thinking, what's going on here, is that, how do you respond to that?
No, that totally resonates. I've got a quick anecdote to share that I would love to have you respond to. Before it scrolls past, I want to acknowledge that Patrick has kindly opened another can of worms. Thank you for that, Patrick. Business analysis and business analytics.
Yeah.
I know that's something that you've spent time thinking about. So I'll let you respond to that in a moment. But here's the quick anecdote. Okay, so I think it was the same project actually, which is probably why it popped into my consciousness. So I'm on this fraud project, and what I did is I told the internal customer. So this wouldn't be the sponsor, but this would be the person that I had the most contact with. And then, by the way, on the data side specifically, we usually talk about there being a data steward. I haven't had an experience yet where I have a BA interfacing with the data steward so that I'm dealing with the data steward indirectly. But the provenance of the data is really important. How did it get there? Was it hand entered? Was it machine entered? Did it come from Internet of Things? Did a client fill out a form? Did an employee fill out a form? All that stuff is incredibly important. So here I am at the fraud project. I'm physically in the building, with the badge and so on, which is common for the kind of stuff that we do. And I said, I want to follow the journey of the data from the initial phone call that comes in through the whole process. So that's, I don't mean I'm in a conference room with an IT professional. I mean that I have a headset and I'm in the cube listening to the initial call come in, watching the data entry occurring. Then I move to the next booth, and then I move to the next booth as it goes, this claim goes into this physical pile, and this claim goes here, and this is going to get fast tracked. That whole journey. I've been on projects where I'm like a secret shopper and I'm like physically doing this. So
analysis, you're doing business analysis. Yes, exactly.
We're back to that. And so why do you think in that case, I mean, that was quite a few years ago now, this was a regional insurance company. They weren't huge. It's possible they didn't have anybody with that title. Clearly, I don't think that I could have done the job successfully without somebody doing that. But it's kind of, I'll add one more piece to that, by the way, is what I'm trying to accomplish, because I tell that story to some data scientists and they get a little puzzled. They go, I don't understand. I should be able to get the metadata, the description of the data and the data, and that should be enough. What do you think you're accomplishing by putting on the headset, like walking around stuff? What I'm looking for is anything that I observe in the real world that I can't reconcile with the data, or vice versa. Do I see variables in the data that no one can explain to me where they come from? Or do I see things in the world that don't happen to be, that I don't see recorded in the data? And then I ask questions until I can get the world and the data to be reconciled. So I can see you nodding. So obviously I was doing something similar to what you do. But
well, we have
do you think it is
a common technique we call observation, and it's going out and observing users in their process, and not just them using a system, but everything that happens exactly from the point of a phone call and listening to the phone call, and then understanding how did that data get into a system, right? And then where did it flow? So the systematic and non-systematic things you're observing, and the data flow, and I don't mean necessarily systematic data flow from technical systems. I mean systematic from an overall system that includes technology and manual processes, right? And yeah, that's very much a business analysis practice. Now, to address that question, why weren't you assigned a BA to partner with you on that? Good question. Depending on what year it was, the business analysis title and role has been increasing over time. So in a lot of organizations, the business analyst title and role might not even been there until the 90s or 2000s, right? In fact, when IIBA came on the scene in 2003, there was huge increase over the years in recognition of that as a role and title. The other thing that happens that I'm really passionate about addressing is that in a lot of organizations, especially financial services, healthcare, insurance, business analysis as a title and role has been kind of relegated to be a documenter of system requirements. And that I'm just really passionate about making sure that that isn't how BAs are seen. And that's not necessarily what they're all about, right? That might be a small part of what they do. But if an organization is saying, oh, we have business analysts, they do things like write specification documents, they're missing the boat. They're missing the boat on what true value business analysis is. And in the BA BOK, our body of knowledge for business analysis, we have there's barely any time spent on how to write a spec document. It's just like a doctor and a lawyer, they write things all the time in their professions too. We don't call them documenters. So for some reason, the role has kind of been pinholed in some organizations to be note takers. And I truly believe it's a misunderstanding of the role and a lack of training and mentoring.
So let's, it might be dangerous to do a thought experiment live like this, but why not?
Why not?
Let's just imagine that you and I are putting our experiences together and we're trying to come up with kind of a dream team for a predictive analytics project, right? So again, just making the prediction about this individual claim. So notice this makes it really super different than the pivot table thing that we were talking about earlier, right?
Yeah.
There are important and valuable things you can do in a pivot table, but I can't do what I do in a pivot table because I need every single claim, right?
Yeah,
so
too much data.
My table is 500,000 rows, 5 million rows, 30 million rows, right? So I'm not only that, it's Excel would just.
So how technical do you get in those tools? Talk about the dream team. Someone in your role, how technical do you get with the technology that enables millions of rows?
In other words, yeah. So
if you can't be scrappy and use Excel and other, run-of-the-mill basic tools, basic data tools, but a lot of them kind of have a limit at about 500,000 rows, right?
Yeah. So, but this gets us on a potentially on a completely different path that most data scientists, particularly if they're external like me, I don't get too deep into scalability issues. Like if they've chosen to go on the cloud or what their data infrastructure is. Colleagues like Mark Pico, who's joined, would be really an expert coming at it from that side of the house, right? But the reason is sometimes it's hard to do that as an external resource. But you're right, I have to be in tools that have that large amount of data because my mission is either nightly batch, or possibly in real time.
Yeah.
Eventually, what will happen to my prediction is somebody will hit an enter key because they filled out a form, or they've just called an 800 number, and the employee is hitting an enter key. And when that enter key is hit, a risk score comes up, and that risk score is now going to route it to fast tracking or what have you. So a lot of the things that I've certainly heard you say in your classes about business analysis, that becomes really important. Where is that data coming from? Where is that being routed? Where's the value? But from the standpoint of the person who's building the model, because that's basically what I'm the expert in, is building the model, that one specific piece, trying to do that as accurately as possible. Either I'm going to send a claim to the investigators that's a true positive or a false positive, right? So my ROI calculation is going to come from that. What does it cost to get in your car and drive around and take a picture of an accident site, and look for the broken glass and measure the length of the mark left in the road where the brakes engaged and so on, right? That's going to cost money. That's going to cost a lot of money. So every false positive is going to cost the company thousands of dollars. But a true positive might save them the cost of litigation, which could be like 100, 200,000. That's where my ROI calculation is coming from. But it starts very granular at the individual claim level and then gets built up from there. And that's why, although you could do a similar estimate from a pivot table, what I'm doing can't be done in a pivot table because you need I might be looking at every single claim over 5 years.
Right. So if it's going to cost a company $5 million, let's say, to build this model, and I'm not saying, Keith, that's your paycheck for this, right? We're just saying that overall the project might be a $5 million investment between all the different costs. I'm being facetious with that comment, right? But you're thinking from an ROI perspective, I got to work with legal and other finance people to figure out how much these claims are costing them. And then if I can identify them and eliminate parts of that business process and what's the cost of each of those parts of the business process, I can get to an ROI. That's how I think about it as a BA, right?
Like these are numbers that probably the finance team knows, or they can do with a relatively small amount of digging. But again, if there was a BA in an organization, that they would possibly be gathering that information, because I've had times where I might have to call the CFO's team directly to say, how many instances of litigation have you had over the last 60 months, and what was the average cost of that litigation? So as an external resource, I've had those conversations because I've been on many projects where there's no one else to do that.
Yeah, I can take that even deeper too to help the BAs out there. If you're a BA and you're thinking, yeah, we don't do ROI, we don't have time for that, or maybe you're in an agile environment, where my mind goes on this is things like, well, if we can understand what parts of the process cost the most money and align the automations and the machine learning to those exact parts, and you can show that analysis in a visual diagram to show, okay, look, here's our current process for these claims at a high level. I'm not talking about spending months developing that current process, just high level process. Boom, here's the biggest cost because I worked with finance and figured that out. And then boom, that piece right there, if we have predictive analytics that can do this, we can eliminate these pieces of the process, right? So sometimes it's a macro level look at ROI, but I like to look at it as how do we chunk out increments of value along the way and then say what parts of technology, be it analytics or non-analytical technical pieces, can really start chunking away at that ROI, right? And that's where a business analyst comes in and overlaps with things.
Well, I certainly agree. And I think that I get occasional pushback from data scientists on the ROI calculation. It comes in a different form.
Okay.
I think the argument that you were making, I agree with you, is that some people would say, oh, if we do some elaborate estimate now, we're just going to get bogged down on that. We'll never have a perfect estimate. Yeah. For me, if you're trying to predict something that's binary, which is usually what I encourage, you've only got 4 possibilities. You've got true and false positives. You get true and false negatives. You should be able to come up with a guesstimate of the value of each. That's only 4 numbers to come up with. And then you look at the previous 12 months or the previous 36 months, what have you, and how often did those occur? So if you're trying to avoid litigation, and litigation is 6 figures, if you can move, you look at the current process, and if you can move 20, 30 events from false negative, okay, you should have investigated them and you didn't, and move them over to true positive.
Great.
You get your couple $1 million, and you threw out 5 million as an estimate. For me, if a project like this is going to take, let's say, 4, 6, 8 months, and you've got an external resource, you have an internal customer that maybe is spending 4 hours a week, in meetings, you've got a data steward that's maybe spending 10 hours or something like that a week. I always find that if the project's not going to clear $1 million, you're not going to break even. But what a lot of companies will do is they'll just say, oh, we paid the consultants X amount. I don't think that's ambitious enough. I think you have to recoup all the expense, internal and external.
Exactly. That's what I meant by 5 million. Not that that's just going to the data scientist, that's all the internal resources, costs, tech, everything, the whole process, right? Not just the data piece. Yeah. So there's an interesting comment Patrick just wrote in, and I don't know if Keith or Megan can put it on screen, but I think it might be worthy of that. We'll have to change the title of this event. There you go. From business analysis versus data scientist to business analyst and data science go hand in hand.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm still so curious about this. Oh, so that I got the dream team idea about 10 minutes ago, and then we kind of went off in a different direction. So let's just stay on this insurance fraud thing. What would be if you were in charge of both the external team and the internal team, and you could kind of decide who should be part of this predictive analytics dream team? Who are the players?
So super interesting question, because my brain goes towards skills versus titles, because so much of our conversation here has been how much the titles can have really vague definitions and vague interpretations and be different in every organization. So it's really like, what is the dream skill set we need to make this happen? And then who's got it? And I would love to say this title has this skill and this title has this skill. And if I talk about that, that's in terms of ideals, right? Because I know a lot of business analysts that just don't have some of the skills we're talking about. And likewise, you were saying a lot of data scientists don't have some of the skills you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And any of them can cross over into any of these skills. And a lot of the things you and I are talking about are really the skills people learn as they move up in their career. The more strategic, the more ROI, the big picture, those to me are skills you grow into in our fields. They're not necessarily skills you'd have at an entry level as a BA or a data scientist, right? So dream team is kind of an interesting one because, yeah, would I love to have a business analyst, a process analyst, an experienced designer, a data scientist, a data analytics and business intelligence person, a project manager involved? Absolutely. But am I assuming certain skills are involved? Could a different team do that? Yeah, as long as they have the skills needed.
Yeah.
It's like LinkedIn's going towards the whole skill first thing we keep hearing about, right? And I really believe that's important. And hence, that's why BAs need to take some of your courses. They need to learn about predictive analytics as a skill, not necessarily be an expert in it, but they have to be aware of it so they know where to plug in, right?
Well, I think we speculated when we were chatting before the event about this. We did kind of throw out a theory about perhaps why I haven't encountered BAs. You mentioned the time frame. You're right. If we're going back more than 15 years, then maybe that role wasn't as common, as it is now. The particular project I was talking about was 8 or 9 years out. So presumably the BAs existed, but perhaps not at that company. Or I'm sure by industry there are differences. Too. They might be more common in banking than insurance or something like that. You would know more about that than me. But one of the reasons I think that BAs or even the project management office isn't always involved is that the work that I do, and I've always found this strange and not a great idea, but it happens, is that often folks like me are associated with vendors of machine learning software. So it's not seen as a services purchase. It's seen as a software purchase. And oh, by the way, the vendor has a Rolodex. No one physically has one anymore, but the vendor has a list of resources like me that, oh, by the way, when we'll send out a team to install it, and then we're going to send out a team to help you build your first model. That's a classic scenario, by the way, right? How can
Yeah.
I be sure my team is going to be able to use it? And it's always this combination of don't worry about that because it's so easy, you won't need any help. But by the way, we'll send you a half dozen people. Right,
yeah,
so.
and the vendors will typically talk the client into not needing a BA, quite frankly.
Oh, well, yeah, because maybe because they want more control over the process, or they want more control over the narrative, right?
Could
So
be.
it gets into a little bit of an uncomfortable topic because we certainly don't want to throw stones at vendors, but I
No.
think there's a lot of reasons why that just kind of happens, right?
Right.
I
Right.
used to joke with friends and colleagues for years that I sometimes felt like the mint on the pillow at the hotel, you know, that there would be this multi-million-dollar software purchase, and we'll give we'll give you 4 to 6 weeks of a model builder's time
Mhm.
for free. Of course,
Yeah.
it's not really free, it's bundled in. But the problem with that often is that I don't get to do the assessment or the scoping that I'd like to do because I'm already boxed in. Somebody weeks prior has put me in this box and said, Keith, you know, don't worry about it. You're just kind of got thrown in with the purchase. You know,
Yep.
like when
No,
like a
you're
nice
right.
Airbnb
Yeah, the
leaves.
vendor doesn't necessarily mean to cut the BAs out. I probably said that with the wrong tone, but it's more of according to their contract and what they're trying to do, they need to have that control, and they have BAs and functional analysts and data scientists on their team to do that work, right? So that's why the answer is in a box, whereas the client needs to realize, oh, okay, I need a BA to on the inside and outside of the process that we're implementing with this package software and to integrate it all. But usually that's not the question and conversation that takes place. So it's really a miscommunication between client and vendor, right? Because a client might say, well, who's going to do the requirements for your package? Oh, we take care of that. We've got our functional analysts. Oh, well, who's going to take care of the integrations? Oh, all of our APIs are documented. You're good. I mean, these are just basic traditional answers that make a lot of sense in the context of a vendor box. But
Yeah,
I played the role so many times to be that integrator BA that, and usually the vendor is like, wow, I'm so glad you're here. This is amazing. And so is the client, right?
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. It's just the conversation is starting in a different place, and all of the mechanisms internally that you would normally do at the beginning of a project or the beginning of a product launch aren't in place. Right. Because it was just like, oh, it's just a purchase, and all that other stuff is we're just gonna follow the vendor's lead because they're the experts.
Yeah.
But every organization is different, you know. So I'm curious if anybody has comments about that kind of thing, because I think everybody's trying to do the best job they can, but somehow it happens that way. And I usually find that when I've been sent to a project via vendor, a lot of times I feel like I'm starting on step 3 or step 4, not starting on step 1. And that can be uncomfortable.
I know the chat got kind of quiet. Where is everybody? Oh, here's a good question from Shelly. Do we see the industry going to different titles or away from titles? And you say skills first. Ooh, that's an interesting question, Shelly. So LinkedIn has been quite vocal about the whole industry becoming a skills-based industry rather than title. So realize that, and I've always been an outsider too, Keith, like you have, where I see it very differently than someone who's been with big organizations their entire career, because big organizations, everything's hung on titles, everything. But where some people are predicting is that even HR systems and stuff are going to start moving more towards a skills type thing. Will titles go away? Probably not, or not for a very long time. I just hope that everyone on the call recognizes that titles are different in every organization. So if you hang yourself on a title from your current company, that title does not necessarily or ever mean the same thing in another organization. So roles start to get closer, and that can be kind of gray. What's the difference between title and role? But really skills, right? Skills is where it's at. What is your skill set? And when I mean HR systems are going to change, they're already talking about performance and pay based on skills, not by title. So, but
Yeah,
are you seeing the same thing?
yeah, I keep on you're triggering so many memories, about earlier in my career, and maybe when I started out, some of the options that we're talking about today wouldn't be available, like taking some classes on, via BA or something like that, right? I mean, those we didn't have such easy access to professional development that we have now,
Right.
through things like the LinkedIn Learning Library. But when I started out, no one told me that I had to do these kinds of BA skills as part of building predictive models. So I'd love to get, Dean, I've asked you to chime in a couple of times, but I was probably 5 or 10 years in my career before I figured out that, okay, I'd better be doing this because the models aren't going to succeed otherwise. And it's kind of interesting in my role at Pandata, which is a small consultancy that I work with, and I really enjoy working with the team. The data scientists, who are all incredibly gifted at what they do at Pandata, when they do ask questions of me as kind of a somewhat more veteran data scientist, they're almost all in this category. And it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Because, I mean, for a whole bunch of reasons, they don't come to me with questions about how to tune the Piper parameters in their model or whatever. One, because technically they're so strong. And two, that stuff changes all the time. So every data scientist gets specialized in their own little technology niches. So I can't be as helpful there. But they're all in the first decade of their career for the most part. So you just have fewer projects under your belt. And with fewer projects under your belt, you haven't necessarily learned through the school of hard knocks that if you do this business analysis stuff incompletely, it's going to get you when you get to project milestones or at model deployment. So the point that I'm making is they're a very gifted team, but these are the kinds of conversations that I have with them. So that's why I've always, in terms of titles, I've always associated this skill set in my field with senior data scientist.
Yeah.
Because that's what you do. You get the data scientist that's been beat up a little bit over by experience, and because no one told them in school that they had to do this. But if they're 10, 15, 20 years into their career, they've figured out how important this is. Those of you on the machine learning side, do you find that to be true as well, that the data scientists out there and the machine learning folks out there that are good at the kinds of things that we're talking about are probably 10 plus years into their career? And is that something we should worry about? Maybe we should be.
I think, Pat, there's a huge pattern here that you're hitting on, Keith, because business analysis is the same thing. The more senior you go, the more a business analyst as well is into these same thought patterns you're talking about. And I think it's a seniority thing. It's a how you grow in your career thing, no matter what field you're in, perhaps.
Yeah.
Like, because a junior business analyst is going to be doing a lot of documenting, a lot of shadowing, a lot of updating documents and detailed analysis, but they might not connect it all the way up to the bigger picture. Whereas, a more senior business analyst is going to definitely, through the school of hard knocks, like you said, know that, wow, if we miss that part, we get complaints later. It's not working, etc.
So let's end on this note, because we just have a couple of minutes left. What would you love to see added to, kind of a BA curriculum or a BA skill path, learning path, I guess we'd call it, that might be related to the kinds of things that I do, and I'll try to do the same.
Great question. I'm picking off of Patrick's latest comment too about how BAs are being seen to slow things down. So we talk about what needs to be added to BA curriculums. It's in combination with data. It's how to dynamically put data analysis into your role without slowing the team down. So we can't slow the team down with requirements work and say, no, I need 4 months to do requirements. My whole passion is all of this can happen in parallel. We can start a project and start sprinting and get a deliverable out in 2 weeks, something demoable to the business. We can also in parallel work on the ROI, work on the data, work on all of it. We don't necessarily need a big phase up front. And I've done this with a lot of different clients. I feel like there's so many BAs out there that need to learn how to expedite this process and not be seen as slow through their data analysis and other analysis, right? BAs tend to want to, go work with a data scientist. Oh, give me another phase to do that. It's like,
Oh, wow.
no, we can collaborate. We can add value while moving and doing the real analysis work we need to do.
Do you think there might be a hesitancy among some business analysts to reach out to the data science projects that are going on too, feeling that it's all about neural nets and it's all about deep learning and
there's a hesitancy, but not for those reasons.
Okay.
I think I'm not sure most BAs understand those terms even. I would say it's a hesitancy if someone's going to be like, no, just go back to your desk and do your job. People will see them as getting in the way and slowing things down.
Wow. Because, I'll tell you, when I'm an external resource, it's sometimes hard to get the meetings I need to ask the questions. There have been times certainly where if I had somebody on the inside that also wanted to answer these questions, that it would be such a huge help. I mean, think about having to go, if I'm reporting up through, the maintenance team or marketing or what have you, the CFO doesn't know who I am. Right. How am I necessarily going to be able to go to them and get the numbers I need for that ROI calculation? Or how does somebody do that if they're 1 year into their career, they just got their data science masters or whatever. In other words, they don't feel that they have a lot of political capital. They're an external resource. No one recognizes their name and they're asking financial questions.
Yeah. They have to do it very carefully. It's a very, I like to say it's a skill, but first it's a mindset.
Yeah. It's
a mindset, and then it's a communication skill to communicate why you're doing these things, and that doesn't have to be before you do it. It depends what kind of network you have in the organization to reach out. But I mean, I definitely made the mistakes early in my career of going to my boss and saying, hey, I need to go reach out to this data scientist and this person and this person, this person. And the boss is like, why? You just have to get this deliverable done. Just get it done, Angela. And it took me practice and skills to learn how to communicate why it was so important that I go meet with those people. And so that's what's hard is when you're kind of more of a junior in your career, you might not know or understand the organization, the politics, or how to communicate why you need that info and why that's so important. And I definitely went through those bumps early in my career. Yeah. And I mean, even today when I'm working with clients on projects, it's so intuitive to me to go meet with certain groups. And my clients are like, but why? And still, it's an ever-evolving skill set to try to communicate that why.
Yeah, I think that for me, the number one thing that I'm getting out of this conversation that I think data scientists and machine learning experts should know is who are the folks inside the organization, particularly if you're external like I've been over the years, that are there to help you if you know that they exist. Right. And you can reach out to them because, most young data scientists, they've got the email of the internal customer and that's it. They don't talk to anybody else, and that's why. So it's partly a skill set. It's partly a mindset. It's partly they just simply don't know who to ask. So the conclusion is it must not be my job to ask these questions because I don't even know where to begin on who to ask or how to ask,
Well, and I think that's where some visual modeling comes in for BAs and maybe data scientists too. If you can put the questions on a visual model and be a little humble, curious, play dumb just a little bit and be like, hey, if I could get this question answered, I could do this and go to that person who can then go, oh, well, you need to talk to so-and-so. So like make it their idea to go bring those other people in because you formed the question correctly. And that goes for both BAs and data scientists, right?
I like I like humble, curious. That's a great phrase. It reminds me of Columbo.
Maybe it's a good place to end, right? The whole
Yeah.
concept of both roles need to make sure they're asking the right questions versus demanding organizational changes that
Yeah.
no one else can see. If we ask the right questions, no matter which role we're in, it's going to be someone else's idea to get us looped in with those other roles.
Yeah, that humble, curious, even playing dumb thing that Columbo does. I hope we're not dating ourselves too much. I think that'll be in reruns forever. So hopefully everybody knows who we're talking about. But he's just wonderful on how he'll ask seemingly innocent questions that are helping him piece together the whole puzzle. Everybody, this has been just fabulous. I hope that this lives on in recording with lots of comments. We do want to end on time, but please do. Now we're in StreamYard, so it'll be very interesting to go over to LinkedIn, which I'm sure Angela and I will both do over the next couple of days, and try to keep the conversation going. Angela, thank you so much for coming. I hope. I think we have so much unfinished business. I'm sure we'll continue the conversation in some form at some point. I'll be doing another one of these in about a month. Details will be in my feed. If you follow Angela, but not me, or me and not Angela, I hope you'll correct that right now. And thanks again for coming, everybody.